Hey everyone, I'm Vince. Today I'm going to share with you a book by Mariann Budde, the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, and it's called How We Learn to Be Brave. If you like book summaries and like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you don't really care for this video, but you still like book summaries, hey, this might have just been a bad one. Check out my channel anyway. All right. Budde made a name for herself, or maybe I should say most recently made a name for herself, on January 20th, 2025, when she delivered a sermon at the National Prayer Service for the incoming President, Donald Trump, and his administration. Now, many people that I know listened to the whole sermon, but only the last few minutes of it. In the last few minutes, Reverend Budde pleaded with President Trump to show mercy on those who might suffer under his policies. She said there was a lot of people in America, especially in the minority communities, that were very scared of what might be coming, and she begged for mercy for them. Obviously, that was a big deal, and Trump did not like it very much, and it put Budde in the spotlight. What you might not know is that this was not her first time to be in the spotlight. This is not the first time that she stood up for Christian values or the values of Christ in the face of domineering authority. And in fact, more specifically, in the face of President Trump. You may remember that in 2020, as a response to the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer, demonstrations and sometimes riots broke out all over the country. One in particular occurred in Washington, D.C., close to the White House. During these demonstrations, President Donald Trump, during his first term, had demonstrators removed by force and with tear gas and bully clubs from Lafayette Park, which is right across the street from the White House, so that he could march across the park to St. John's Church for a photo op. President Trump walked in front of St. John's, held up a Bible upside down, and took a picture, and then he left. St. John's is an Episcopal church, and so this is one of the churches in the Diocese of Washington, which is run by Bishop Mariann Budde. Budde became very vocal in speaking out about that incident. She said that the church knew nothing about it and did not condone it. She spoke out in her assessment that the president used the Bible as a prop while not adhering to all those things that are written in the Bible. Instead of offering compassion and words of comfort, or even acknowledging the pain felt by the country at the time, he asserted his authority by using the Bible like a weapon. Okay, so Budde opens this book, How We Learn to Be Brave, by recounting that episode, because this book is really a fruition of that episode. She says in the epilogue, "In these pages, I've sought to place the events of June 1st, 2020 within a larger context, exploring how we learn to be brave over the course of a lifetime and in all aspects of life, especially when the courageous decisions we make are known only to God." When speaking of the genesis of this book, she had said in interviews that while some people perceived her actions at that time against Donald Trump to be brave, she felt that she was compelled to speak on behalf of others who had no voice. And then as she thought more about it, she thought about writing this book and about how we prepare ourselves for moments that arise that require us to be brave. In the preface, she says, "Ultimately, what I want to communicate in these pages is that heroic possibilities lie within each of us, that the inexplicable, unmerited experience of God's power working through us is real, and that we matter in the realization of all that is good and noble and true." So basically, she wants to say that there is such a thing as goodness, that God works goodness through us, and that we are all capable of being used by God for goodness. Okay, so my guess is if you're here watching this video, the chances are you're a lot like me. You heard her speak at that morning service to President Trump, you were impressed, and you wanted to find out more. Now, I was very impressed with her and her sermon and her courage, and I consider her somewhat of a hero, standing up for the values of Christ. So I have nothing bad whatsoever to say about her. The book, however, I'm not going to lie to you, it was a very difficult book for me, not to read. I mean, it was a very easy read, but I didn't quite understand what the point was. What was the flow, or what was her argument? I almost felt like, after her publicity, there was a desire for a book, and so she quickly put one together. Now, some people absolutely love this book. You can see that by the many Amazon reviews. You may love the book if you've read it or are going to read it in the future. And I certainly didn't find it terrible. That's not what I'm trying to say. To me, it just read more like a daily inspiration book than it did a book with a thesis. And that's not bad if that's what you're looking for. I just don't normally find myself reading daily inspiration books. So if you're one of those like me who really like Mariann Budde, and you just really like to know what's in this book, I hope this summary helps. What she's ultimately saying is that being brave is not a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's not a one-time deal. We live our lives and are constantly making decisions and growing into the person that God wants us to be. We're learning how to stand up for our principles, and we're learning how to stand up for one another. What I believe she's trying to get across is that being brave is a process, and it's not just a one-time deal. It's not an action. It's a process. Well, process is an action. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. It's a development over the course of our lives. Okay, number one, deciding to go. When we think of making decisions and the need to be brave, the first thing that we think about is going, like leaving our current situation in life. I really would have liked Budde, however, to go into more detail about how to distinguish whether it's a call to go and do something, that we need to be brave because it's a call by God, something that's going to be good for us, or if we just feel like we're being called, but it's really a bad move. For instance, she says, the fact that the cost of going is high confirms that it is important. But if the cost is high, it can also confirm that you're making a really bad move, like joining a pyramid scheme. Costs a whole lot, not the best thing to do. Going to protest the new president by invading the Capitol probably is going to cost you a lot, but not the smartest move to make. However, so what she's talking about is the former, when we're called to something greater in life, when God is calling us. She says that when an opportunity comes, we are rarely, if ever, ready. So the perfect moment's never going to be there. The important thing is that we accept the challenge. And so she demonstrates this like when talking about Abraham and Sarah and their call in Genesis. She says, the fact that the text doesn't tell us what Abraham and Sarah felt is a helpful reminder that in our decisive moments, our feelings or anyone else's are surprisingly irrelevant. What matters is whether we choose to heed the call. She talks about what she calls the hero's journey, which I remember from one of my literature classes in college. My teacher called it the Great American Story. And this is where the hero leaves their home, they go on a journey, and they're transformed through their trials, and then they return home as a different or a transformed person. In this, she talks about some of her own journeys, like as a kid when she left Colorado to go live with her mother in New Jersey. She also talks about people like Howard Thurman, who left his familiar position in life in order to advance the liberation of black people under Jim Crow. And in that, he produced works that would eventually be used in the American Civil Rights Movement. By the way, you can find a summary of Thurman's most influential book, Jesus and the Disinherited, on my YouTube channel. Okay, so basically in this section, she talks about how choosing to leave the familiar can be a courageous act leading to a transformative experience. And that's what God is calling us to grow. Number two, choosing to stay. Sometimes we see the decision to go as the big changing decision, the hero's journey. But, and I thought this was a pretty neat perspective, Budde points out sometimes the big decision can be choosing to stay. We don't always see this as a choice or one that requires bravery or courage. We might think that going is like the big thing and staying is just being a coward. But staying is also a choice, and it requires courage. Courage to face the current challenges or even feelings of stagnation. She says that staying in our current situation offers an opportunity to delve deeper into the circumstances that lead to personal growth and a renewed sense of purpose. She emphasizes that choosing to stay is not about complacency, but involves a conscious commitment to engage more profoundly with one's current situation. So this path often demands introspection, resilience, and a willingness to confront discomfort, and ultimately, these things too can foster personal and spiritual development. She says, I learned that choosing to stay didn't mean staying the same. So basically, whether we stay or go, we need to have the courage to be able to let our decisions influence us. 3, the third thing she talks about, choosing to start something new. In this section of the book, she talks about the bravery required to choose to start something new, even when we know it'll be difficult or there's going to be hardship along the way. And her big advice here is, or at least the big advice that I got, was that the overall plan from the beginning to end is not required. A car trip on a dark night, she reminds us, is accomplished only by seeing what is immediately in front of you. The other night I watched the movie Creed again. If you don't remember this movie, it's a boxing movie. It's in the Sylvester Stallone Rocky series. But anyway, it reminded me of this because they repeated the mantra when he got in the ring. They would say, one step, one punch, one round at a time. And so anyway, that reminded me of this book. Like little by little, we'll get there. One of the stories that she told here that I found very interesting and meaningful was that she had been a priest of a church for an awful long time, and she was going to leave. But when the circumstances changed, and then she was going to stay, she said the only way she would do it is if she could change, right? And so she went and talked to the leaders in the church, and she talked about her plan, and she said, honestly, I don't have a long-term plan. And they said, well, do you have a plan for the next year? And she said, yes. And they said, well, that's a good start, right? So anyway, if you have a plan for a year, you don't need a plan for 10. That's what she's trying to say here. The next section, number 4, she talks about the choice of accepting. So the next type of choice she deals with is this choice of accepting something. There are things that will happen in our lives that are beyond our control. And I think particularly of like suffering and pain. So while we don't have control over the circumstances, we do have control of how we respond to them. What she says is acceptance can look like passivity or resignation, but it's not. For in acceptance, we actively engage with whatever we're faced with, precisely because this is what we're faced with. Here she enters into the subject of redemptive suffering, that suffering, if we let it, can be meaningful and transformative. She encourages readers to find purpose in their suffering, viewing it as an opportunity for personal growth and a deeper connection with others. By embracing what we cannot change with faith and discernment, we open ourselves to transformation and the possibility of emerging stronger and more compassionate. This reminded me of the book by Richard Rohr, Everything Belongs, and he talks an awful lot about how suffering can jar us awake, and it can make us view the things around us differently, and it can also make us closer to one another. If you're interested in that book, by the way, that's something else that I summarize on this channel. Okay, the next section is choosing to trust oneself. She calls this stepping up to the plate. It's a lot like the last section in that it talks about when we are given things in life, or things in life are thrust upon us. But in the last section, she mostly talked about suffering, and here she talks about other challenges that come upon us without warning. Remember, she's writing shortly after 2020, so she really has in mind here COVID-19. That's really the big thing that's happening. But she does also discuss other major life-changing things that come upon us. And her advice here is that we learn to be brave in trusting ourselves and our past experiences, that we trust our own instincts and embrace the call to act. She encourages readers to recognize and cultivate their own inner readiness, understanding that bravery often manifests itself in the willingness to respond wholeheartedly to life's unexpected demands. Through telling the story of Jonathan Daniels, a kid studying to be an Episcopal priest who got shot by local police when he went to Alabama to join the Civil Rights Movement, Budde says that his courage might have been what cost Daniels his life, but it was also the thing that taught him how to live. The sentiment is that a life where we don't stand up for what is right might be a long life, but it's also a meaningless life. And that's something, again, that you can get, I think, from Howard Thurman in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. Okay, the next section that I found, and in the last section, I'll call it choosing to reflect and grow. Not only are we going to be constantly met in our lives with times when we can choose to be brave and leave, or to stay, or to choose to accept things, or to trust ourselves, she warns that after such times when we have a surge of bravery, there's almost always a feeling of emptiness or doubt as life returns to routine and unresolved issues resurface. She says that this is just the toll of the mountaintop experience. And that sounds right? Like if you go off and you have this wonderful experience and you forget about reality that you left behind, well, reality's not going anywhere. It's just going to keep piling up on you. And I like her example of this when she goes off to, she talks about when she goes off to a Christian conference or a camp or something like that. And well, guess what? You know, back in the real world, who's taking care of the kids and the bills and all of life? And that's her husband. So when she gets back from her time, you know, her husband's not necessarily happy with her. I mean, he's not upset with her, but at the same time, he's not necessarily on the same level as she is because he hasn't been away all this time recuperating and learning and growing and experiencing God on the mountain. And so she needs to make sure to tend to all the things that she neglected while she was away. But she says this doesn't mean that the mountaintop experience didn't happen. And that's what we often do is we forget about the mountaintop experience when we get back to real life. She says the important thing to remember is the experience was real and to hold on to that. Budde reassures readers that these letdowns are a natural part of the process. She lets us know that these feelings are common and can serve as opportunities for reflection and for growth. She emphasizes the importance for perseverance and for aligning one's life with the insights that were gained during these decisive moments. What seems to be the most important message throughout the book is that we need to learn how to find our values and to stick with our values. The learning to be brave is not something that you learn by reading a book, for instance, but something that you prepare your life for as you learn who you are and how to persevere and to stand up for who you are and what you believe. Okay, so that is my summary of Mariann Budde's How We Learn to Be Brave, at least the best I can do. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did get something out of it, please hit the like button and let me know. Give me a little bit of encouragement. And if you like videos like this, subscribe to my channel.